Hello everyone, I'm Philip Myers, Director of PEMY Consulting. I, along with Earl Crochet of Kinder Morgan, are co-chairs for a new initiative at the American Petroleum Institute Storage Tank Committee called SCAST. This stands for the Subcommittee on Above Ground Storage Tanks. Today I'm going to talk to you about petroleum and chemical storage facilities and NATECH, and a new publication to begin to address tank NATECH issues, that is, API 656. Many of you have not had a chance to participate in an SDO, or Standards Development Organization, such as API. Note, there are many SDOs in the United States related to all kinds of equipment and technologies, but they also exist in other countries such as the European Union. In these updates, I would like to keep you up to date on the development of API 656. I would also like to provide you with a sense of what it is like to participate and develop a new publication by providing a set of videos as the process moves forward. In fact, it is April of 2020, just prior to the first API Task Group meeting responsible for development of this publication. Normally, we would meet face-to-face at regularly scheduled spring and fall refining meetings, but as you know, there is a lockdown to attempt to quell the COVID-19 virus impacts. I will provide an update on this after our first meeting in late April. This document will most likely be a publication and not a standard or a recommended practice. The title of this publication is still up in the air, but the publication number we have settled on is API 656. It is about tank accidents which are caused by natural hazards such as earthquakes or hurricanes, and what kind of thinking is needed in advance to deal with them effectively when they do occur. It is very important for me to make sure that you understand that I am not speaking for API. I do not represent them, and the opinions expressed herein are solely those of PEMY Consulting and myself. First, I'd like to motivate the ideas behind this publication. When Hurricane Katrina struck in August of 2005, I was visiting some gasoline distribution terminals in Georgia and saw some of the impacts firsthand, but I was also aware of the more deadly and devastating impacts that were going on in Louisiana. Katrina was the deadliest hurricane ever to hit the United States. An estimated 1,833 people died and millions were left homeless. The cost and damage to homes, businesses, infrastructure, and emergency response was over $100 billion. When Hurricane Harvey made landfall on Texas and Louisiana in August of 2017, I could not believe the amount of rainfall or the flooding that was happening. News reported 27 trillion gallons of rain fell over Texas and Louisiana. This amounts to 24.5 cubic miles of water, and it would fill Lake Pyramid, Lake Mead, Lake Powell, Crater Lake, and Yellowstone Lake. It would be enough water to keep the Mississippi River running for well over a year. A common thread behind these hurricanes was the inability to determine exactly just how much product or water is needed to ballast and secure the tanks from the effects of water and wind. Another problem was the inability to determine what kind of rainstorm it would take to sink floating roofs. As you may know, at least 16 storage tanks had floating roofs sink during Harvey. As an advanced engineering consulting company, we took an interest in NATECH and were motivated to develop engineering solutions within a year of Harvey. We came up with a risk assessment methodology for dealing with tank facilities and hurricanes and excessive rainfall. We came up with ways to determine if floating roofs could be sunk by rainfall and how much and how fast rain can fall in a particular location, as well as models that determine how tanks fail during hurricanes. More importantly, we came up with a risk assessment methodology that shows which tanks are most vulnerable to failure during these events. As a result of us approaching API with the intent to develop and share this work with the industry and tank facility owner support, API agreed to develop this document, which will be API 656. I want to point out some natural hazard disasters from Wikipedia, that is NATECH events. You can see that hurricanes such as Katrina and Harvey appear, but also seismic disasters are frequent. In fact, the worst natural hazard triggered technological event is at the top of the list and is the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear incident in Japan. An earthquake at the seafloor caused some initial problems with the nuclear reactors, but the ensuing tsunami was the final blow that caused a nuclear meltdown. The incident is costing a large fraction of $1 trillion and is, of course, the most expensive disaster in history. Even today, 9 years later, over 4,000 workers are still on site cleaning up nuclear waste. This incident is often referred to as the 3/11 incident for Japan. Notice the word NATECH. This stands for Natural Hazard Triggered Technological Event. It's jargon that has come from academia as well as other SDOs, in particular those associated with the European Commission. NATECHs arise from any type of natural disaster, and you can think of the initiating event or trigger as a natural event such as storm or earthquake causing a release or releases. In the examples of Hurricane Katrina and Harvey, not only were there multiple releases, but the ability to implement lifelines and emergency response was seriously degraded. Basic infrastructure functionality was seriously hampered. It's not difficult to see why the rate of NATECHs is increasing. Not only are weather patterns changing, but the footprint and density of society's technological infrastructure is growing. Along with that, there has been an increased demand for oil and chemical storage. The recent NATECHs have shown that storage facilities are vulnerable to damage and to releases of hazardous substances. While NATECH is generalized, affecting all types of equipment, facility, and buildings, as well as infrastructure, the focus of API 656 is on tank facilities. The reason that this warrants consideration is that tanks are the primary technological component of infrastructure that tends to lead to large volumes of hazardous substance releases during these events. Because of the relatively low position that tanks have in the big picture of NATECHs, not a lot of engineering technology work has been available or developed to assist in either new or existing facility planning. And of course, this is one key purpose of API 656, which is to provide these considerations specifically for risk assessors, planners, and tank facility owners. I want to emphasize the role of tanks in NATECH incidents. There are many ways to represent the proportion of incidents involving tanks and their contribution to the severity of the incident. This slide shows an EC report, and the quotes indicate that tanks are a key player in the unfolding of NATECH disasters. Note the black oil spill releases. These tanks appear to be larger than 150 feet in diameter. Here is a crude oil spill caused by Hurricane Katrina at Cox Bay, Mississippi. Even though the tanks were ballasted with 45,000 barrels of oil and greater than the amount to account for buoyancy, this serious spill still resulted. The minimum amount of ballast needed to prevent tanks from sliding during hurricanes has not yet been worked out until PEMY developed research on this, and which will be made available in the public domain and in API 656. Here is another Katrina result of tanks that were pushed by winds off of their foundations and obviously damaged. More tank hurricane damage to tanks caused by storm surge during Hurricane Ike. This is a large oil slick at Goat Island caused by Hurricane Ike. Here is some wind damage caused by Hurricane Katrina. This slide shows wind damage overturning tanks. Some NATECHs are triggered by mud flows resulting from volcanoes called lahars. I worked on the Mount Redoubt incident in Alaska. The main consideration was, would it be better to empty the tanks and keep them full in the event of a mud flow that wiped out or exceeded the secondary containment walls? I leave you to decide what should have been done. The outcome, luckily, was that the lahar was never strong enough to destroy or overtop the secondary containment and flow mud against the tank walls. The worst NATECH incident ever, in my opinion, was the Japan Fukushima Daiichi incident. It occurred on 3/11/11. It is often referred to as Japan's 3/11, just as we refer to our World Trade Center incident as our 9/11. Note the storage facility in the background. These tanks were installed to contain tritium, which is a radioactive water caused by continuing drainage from flowing water entering the reactors and becoming contaminated. Storage is running out, and one plan for the tritium is to slowly release it to the ocean. Here is a view of the storage tanks for tritium. I understand there is over 1 million tons of tritium water stored here. I just want to mention a few things about where and how regulations can emerge from these incidents. The European Union already requires consideration of NATECH events under the Seveso III directive. The OECD, or Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Europe, has guidelines for this as well. Finally, California does not call it NATECH, but essentially contains NATECH preparedness in risk assessment under the Cal ARP program. Naturally, Japan is updating the regulations related to NATECH since the Fukushima incident was not unforeseeable. Moreover, studies show it was preventable. Here are a few useful references that cover the topics that we've discussed today. Probably the most useful would be the Arkema NATECH incident that occurred in 2017. There's a U.S. Chemical Safety Board video that covers this in detail. This is a paper I found that deals directly with storage tanks. I corresponded with Mr. Mayorga and found that he is working along similar lines as Rice University, which I believe has been given a NSF grant for studying storms and storage tanks using fragility models. The problem is that these academic approaches are not directly implementable in terms of practical guidelines and considerations. It takes some translation between academia to industry, and that's one of the roles of API 656. This book is probably the most comprehensive resource for tanks at the current time. I want to thank you for paying attention to this important topic, and I look forward to providing another update within a few weeks. Thank you.